You've probably heard about California's Cap and Trade program, right? It's this massive and, let's be honest, kind of complicated powerhouse of climate policy. So how does it actually work? Well, today we're going to cut right through all that complexity. We're going straight to the source, the official rulebook, to really understand the engine that's driving all of this. Let's dive in.
Okay, right from the jump, in Section 95801, the regulation lays out its entire game plan. Now, that's a lot of legal jargon, I know. But what's so cool is that the whole blueprint is right there in that one sentence. You've got reduced emissions, that's the goal, an allowance budget, that's the limit, and a trading mechanism, that's the tool. Seriously, this one sentence is the foundation for everything else we're going to talk about.
So let's just boil down all that official language. At its heart, you could think of the entire cap and trade program with this one simple idea. It's a shrinking, statewide budget for pollution. Honestly, if you only remember one thing today, make it this. This is the core concept that makes the whole system tick.
All right, so to really unpack how this budget works, we're going to break it down into 5 key parts. First, we'll dig into that pollution budget idea. Then, we'll see how they set the hard limit, the cap. Third, we'll explore the marketplace where all the trading happens. Fourth, we'll figure out who actually has to follow these rules. And finally, we'll look at how it's all enforced. So let's start with that main idea. This program isn't about chasing down individual companies one by one. Nope. Instead, it creates one giant economy-wide budget for greenhouse gas emissions for the entire state of California. Okay, so you've got a budget, but how do you enforce it? Well, that brings us to the cap in cap and trade. This is the mechanism that absolutely guarantees that emissions have to go down. The currency of this whole system is something called an allowance. The definition's right there, pulled directly from the rules. Just think of it like a permit. If a company has one allowance, it has permission to emit exactly 1 metric ton of greenhouse gases. It's the basic unit of account for the entire program. Simple as that. So how does that create a limit? Well, it's just simple math, really. The statewide cap is nothing more than the total number of these 1-ton allowances that the state issues every year. The official term for it is the annual allowance budget, and the size of that budget is the cap.
And this is where the magic happens. This is the engine that drives the whole program. See, the regulation has these tables that lay out the annual allowance budget for years into the future. And here's the crucial part. That budget, the total number of permits to pollute, is designed to shrink every single year. This forces the cap lower and lower, sending a super clear signal to the market that companies have to innovate and get cleaner to stay within an ever-tightening limit.
Okay, so we've got a shrinking cap made of these allowances. But what makes it a market system? Well, that's the trade in cap and trade, and this is where things get really dynamic.
Now, to get the marketplace, we need one more official term, a compliance instrument. It sounds kind of fancy, but it's just the general name for anything a company can turn into the state to cover its pollution. And as you can see, it's worth 1 metric ton of CO2. It includes those allowances we just talked about, but it also includes something a little different called an offset credit.
This lays out the life cycle perfectly. First, the state issues a limited number of allowances based on that shrinking cap. Second, those allowances get out to the companies, either for free or through auctions. Third, and this is the key trade part, companies can buy, sell, and trade these instruments with each other. And finally, when it's time to pay up, each company has to surrender 1 instrument for every single ton of pollution it released.
So let's talk about that other instrument, the offset credit. This slide shows the crucial difference. An allowance is a state-issued permit to emit, but an ARB offset credit is different. It's a credit for a verified emission reduction that happens somewhere else, like a project that protected a forest that's soaking up carbon. So a company can comply either by using its permit to pollute or by investing in a project that actually removes pollution from the air.
All right, so we have a shrinking cap and a market to trade in. But who exactly has to play in this system? Let's jump into our 4th section and find out. This is the big question, isn't it? Does this apply to my car, to my house? Who's actually on the hook for all these complex rules? The regulation calls them covered entities. And as you can see from this simpler definition, the program is designed to go after the biggest sources of emissions in the economy. It's not about individuals. It's targeting huge industrial plants, companies importing electricity, and the suppliers of fuels like gasoline and natural gas, and only if their emissions are above a really high threshold.
And just to make it even more real, here are some of the major players. We're talking about the heavy hitters of the economy: petroleum refineries, cement producers, the big utilities that supply our natural gas, and the companies that import electricity into California. These are the operations that have to get their hands on these compliance instruments to cover their pollution.
All right, so the final piece of this puzzle is enforcement. I mean, for a market this huge and this important to actually work, you've got to have strong rules and some real consequences for breaking them.
And the rulebook makes one thing crystal clear. This program has teeth. As it says in Subarticle 15, the state can suspend or even completely revoke a company's right to trade. They can go to court to stop violations, and maybe most importantly, they can hit companies with massive financial penalties for not complying. It makes sure that playing by the rules is really the only option.
So, when you boil this entire complex system down, it comes back to two basic ideas. Set a hard, shrinking limit on pollution, and then let the market figure out the cheapest, most efficient way to stay under it. And that leaves us with one last massive question. Is this combination, a hard cap and a flexible market, powerful enough to solve a problem as enormous as climate change?